Welcome back to Source U, everybody. I am Serge, and I am here with another review for you, as I am now going to review, as promised, Brook Gaming's Mars Wired Controller. This baby right here, or should I say, this baby right here, is actually capable of hooking up to not only the PS4 and the PS3, but also the Switch and your Xbox One. Now, unfortunately, in this review, we will not be reviewing the capabilities of this thing on the Xbox One because I did not pay $500 for a blank screen. However, I was able to run the test on all other aforementioned consoles. So, let's dive into this thing. So the first thing I want to actually talk about before we get into gameplay and all the technical stuff is actually the look and the feel of this thing. First of all, it follows kind of a PlayStation design almost. It actually has the touchpad. It has the home button there. Your option and share buttons would be there. But this also translates to all of the other consoles in a different way. As you can also see here, it has the same colored buttons that the PlayStation would use for its buttons. But instead of using the symbols, it's got letters. At the top where a triangle would be, it is Bravo or B. R for the square button, a actual target instead of a circle or a O, and a K instead of an X, which I thought were some very interesting choices. Fun ones, but interesting nonetheless. And it even has, you see it, the light filter there. So this thing does actually light up like it would on your actual PS4 controller. Now, as far as the weight, it's a little less weight than a regular PS4 controller. As you can see, I have one right here. Bought this one initially to be my my PC controller, as I used to do a lot of PC gaming on my laptop back there when we were using that for everything, and now we have the gaming rig over here. So there's been a bit of a switch, but this has still been a constant. However, it might end up still being that, and we'll use more detail into that later. Not really this thing's fault. But another thing that I kind of want to talk about is the way the buttons feel. One thing that a lot of people don't like is stiff buttons. And this controller is far from being stiff. Except for maybe the way the R1 and the L1 buttons press. And there are times when I'm pressing these babies, I don't even know I'm pressing them. They're very sensitive, but you can't really hear them when you press down on them, really. Like, you don't really feel the press. Like, if you take a PlayStation controller or any other controller, you can hear that, and you can almost feel where it's pressing down. This, it's almost a little bit lighter when you do it, and subtle. Like, I can't, like, there are some gaming habits that I have, like when I'm playing fighting games or shooting games, I love to rest my hands here, and sometimes I end up putting just a little bit weight, but not enough for it to be a full press. With this thing, because it's so, like, the lightest press is enough to set off the button, it does kind of factor in. So it's something to take note of, but not a deal breaker in my opinion. So let's talk more about the way this thing connects. The buttons match up just the way you think they would with the PlayStations 4 and 3. However, with the Switch, your buttons then become K as B, circle or target would become A, your R button would be Y, and obviously B would become X. If you're looking towards the PC or Xbox layout, that would be K is A, O or target is B, your R button would be X, and then B is Y. Start and back being the same as option and share, and then your L and R buttons all pretty much play out about the same, with the keypad or the key button, as they call it, the PS key or the home button, being just that, and the touchpad being for capture. Another great thing about this controller is that, believe it or not, aside from the fact that it comes with a 6-foot USB cable, which is also mini, and I have tried it with other mini USB cables, it will work, just so you know. But the great thing about this thing, as you see here, I have this D-pad on there. Well, what you don't realize is that this is actually interchangeable. If I can just get this off real quick. Hold on, people. Hold on. Okay, I'm not getting this off right now. But I will show you the other two D-pads. So this is a D-pad that initially came on the controller. I don't know if you can really see that, but that is like the square pattern one where it's just like the little square textures on there. Mostly common in like PC controllers and also the NVIDIA gaming controllers mostly. And then you also get this baby, which is, as I like to call it, the X controller, the X pattern D-pad, which is mostly more along the lines of like your, I want to say that goes more towards like more of a D-pad for like shooting games, stuff like that from like back in the day. People used to like using. Of course, I switched out for the traditional putting on there because a lot of the games I'm going to be playing, even though I'm not as good as I used to be, I've really been losing it. I've really been lacking. It's probably because I haven't been playing as much. It's fighting games, and you will see that when we get into the test shots in a moment here, how that fares. But a lot of this is really, really good, and as we explained before, like there's just a lot of upside for this, I feel. So let's get to the testing portion here and see how she holds up, eh? So first we decided to start off with some Mortal Kombat action, a game that I just typically tend to use for like button check scenarios a lot of the times. Don't ask me why, it's just a personal choice. I decided to start off with Mileena just because I'm a huge Mileena fan, always have been. I'm a mark. But I also like to see that because Mileena is one of those characters who has a lot of simple to use basic combos. So I wanted to see how quickly I could figure things out and figure out, oh, am I dropping a combo or is it the controller itself acting up? So she's a good character for that, in my opinion. At the start of this, a lot of it is me stuttering, trying to figure out my way around the controller and also figure out my way around Mileena. So there is a lot of, just simple things happening, me getting hit for no reason at all. Forgetting to block because I'm a nub. And yeah, that's how we start Mortal Kombat. Surprised. So after a little bit of struggling in the first round, I was able to do a full mounted comeback in the second round to take the round all together, but still just stumbling around a little bit. So far the controller feels solid at this point. Like I don't have too many issues. At least not that I can tell at this point. After another round with Mileena, I decided to use Jackie, a character that I actually know a little bit more about and can do some things with inside and out. This would definitely help me figure out if I was dropping combos or not earlier on with Mileena, or if I was just, having some issues figuring the character out right away. So far, everything seems fine here at the beginning of the round. A lot of the usual basic stuff, things that I just know work. Not going for anything too strenuous yet, but just enough to see if there are drops happening at any given point in time in the fight. The second round I felt fairly satisfied with the controls. There was at one point where I went to go and EX move and I felt like I didn't get the result that I wanted, obviously because the move didn't EX. But I did later on check that my control settings were switched around from a previous meeting of me and my cousins playing, and they switched the control settings around and I hadn't realized, so fair enough. So now we move on to a different game. So now we're here with Street Fighter, and I decided to start things off with Cammy, mostly because I'm a huge Cammy mark, and two, because, well, she's actually one of the quicker characters in the game. So anything dropping at this point with, the speed that I'd be moving at, I'd be able to tell for sure. But so far the controller is definitely keeping up. Again, it's not a stiff controller. The buttons are very, very responsive. And one of the things that they do say about this controller is that there is no input lag, which is something that PlayStation controllers do have in spades. This, on the other hand, like this controller, when I press, I can feel like it's actually reacting the moment I press it. I've actually feel like I'm doing better with Cammy in this moment testing this controller than I have like the last couple times I've played Street Fighter V, which isn't really a lot and very few in between. I barely really played this game The most I actually played this game was back when we first were doing recordings for it for the channel with me, Jank, and Goat. And even then, they did the majority of the playing, and I just the watching. Street Fighter V has just not been the game that I initially wanted it to be, but I won't use this as a platform to rant on the game. However, I will say that had I had this controller then, I may have felt a little bit different about that. And so now we switch characters again, and we step over to my favorite Street Fighter character of all time. We step over to Ken. Ken, a character who doesn't change too often from game variants. He only just adds on. So at this point, I am noticing that the top buttons, it is a little bit harder to mash out with when doing his V-Trigger 2, which is his Shin Shoryuken. But outside of that, it's not something that can't be learned how to figure out with the controller, or at least worked on. I feel like this is something that it takes time to work in the button a little bit more before it actually taps out the way you want. Other than that, not bad. So in order to connect this controller to the Switch, you're actually going to have to do two separate things. The first of which is you'll have to go into your settings and go in and activate the Pro Controller wired communication. If you don't do this, it will not pick up this controller. The second thing is that when you plug the controller in, you're going to have to hold down the L1 button while plugging in the USB cable. This can sometimes be a pain. So the first game I'm going to actually try out on the Switch here for this test is Hyrule Warriors by Koei Tecmo, as it is a fast-paced game with a lot of action, a lot of enemies on the screen, so it's going to be a lot for me to do. If at any point should the button start to drop out, I'll definitely notice. So we'll start off by playing this stage here with Sheik and see exactly how we do. As I continue on with the gameplay into this and now switching over to Impa, I notice just how frequently the controller is just actively working. There doesn't seem to be any button drops, and unlike when I used the dock, because this is a Pro controller, and I will be testing this thing on the dock later. If you guys have any questions towards that, let me know. I'll be able to answer it for you in about a day or two after this video drops. Or maybe the day of. We'll see. But from what I gather, it has the correct configuration needed. So there's no missing buttons, there's no weird configuration. It just works as if this was an actual Pro controller made by Nintendo. Surprisingly though, I still like the feel of this better than I've liked any Nintendo controller. And that's saying something, because one of my favorite controllers of all time is the Nintendo 64 controller, but that's a conversation for another time. Satisfied with the way this test is going, I'm decided now that I'm going to switch over to the one game that everybody cares about on this console, Smash Brothers. So at this point, I've decided to go with Roy and went with a random opponent, which they gave me Young Link. This controller test, well, mostly just to see exactly how it feels playing a game like Smash, because, you know, Pro controller and all. So far, it feels amazing. I have a little bit more access to movement on here than I thought I would. I actually feel like I'm moving better on this thing than I did on a GameCube controller, which is saying a lot, because I tend to play Smash with purely nothing but a GameCube controller due to the fact that's just what I got used to over the years. Nothing else has ever really truly felt right. But this right here actually doesn't feel bad at all. It almost feels perfect. The only thing I wish I could say I was able to say more of it on is the response time of some of my buttons. I do feel like that at times I'm not getting in the full press when I'm using the B button side of things, but I think that's more of something on my part than it is on the controllers maybe. But, you know, not anything that's too damaging or too discouraging. Again, I'm not the best when it comes to Smash Brothers. You want good Smash Bros play? Check out my boys over at Brook Gaming. They'll give you a good time. In fact, go check out the Jank's channel. He does Smash every weekend on live streams with a lot of his community there. He does an open forum for it. So if you want to see good Smash play, go see those guys. Definitely. Shout out to Jank, by the way. Miss you, brother. Now, as some of you PC gamers who use Steam may notice that there is an issue with using controllers on Steam sometimes. This mostly comes from the fact that Steam doesn't always recognize any controller to work with a game unless maybe it's an Xbox controller. So there are things that you usually have to do, like use DS4, things like that. However, I decided to try and look at things on a different end, just using this controller standalone by itself. I went inside Steam to check. It does see it as being a PS4 controller by itself, within Steam itself. So there are a lot of games that this controller will not work on, and I did try using this with DS4. However, it will not pick up this controller because it is not an official PlayStation controller, so it's not programmed the same way. However, it does still work. I decided to start here, as you can see, with Killer Instinct, a game that typically works with just about any controller, so this was my starting point. And as you can see, I'm not really having too many problems here. I'm actually almost pulling off my combos as smooth as I had been, especially for a guy who hadn't played in a while. So I didn't really have too much issue here, but because it's Steam and I had to jump around and find games that I know work and don't work, that became more of the challenge. And I suggest that you do take a look at Steam yourselves and see what games are fully compatible with controller all the way and what isn't. The ones that are usually halfway compatible are usually the ones that only work with an Xbox controller. But outside of that, the controller does stay consistent. I haven't had any issues doing any combos. The only issues that I've had are my own, which is me not really remembering how to play Hisako as well as I used to. Other than that, this so far is successful. On to the next game. I was actually delighted to see that this controller worked with 20XX. This game is one of my favorite games out there currently because of the fact that it is the closest thing to a legacy Mega Man game as we're going to get, unlike Mighty 9. So when this controller turned out that it worked just with no issue, I was overjoyed. I was actually at this point on Steam talking to Goat and just talking to him about this game, and we were talking about how much we had to go back to playing it, and I was just explaining to him how well the control was functioning, surprisingly. I was for sure thinking there was going to be some issue, maybe with button layout or something being flipped around as it would be on my PlayStation controller when I use DS4, but no issue whatsoever, just perfect in every way, just perfect. Risk of Rain is a game that me and the guys hold very near and dear. So going back and playing Risk of Rain 2 just so I could test this controller was very cathartic for me. I had not played this game in, months. There was one day during the pandemic where we actually did a huge stream for it. It was me, Goat, Jank, and we even had Burly Boat, aka Azor for sure, on with us. He definitely had fun with us that day. We all did. We did a solid run, almost beat the game even, but we all started feeling the fatigue, so we got off. So going back just to test this controller out with this game, phenomenal. And much like 20XX, this controller just works perfectly. Like, there was no issues at all. I was at least thinking that the weird pressing buttons of L1 and R1 would get in my way, but miraculously enough, it didn't. So, some slight issues that I've come across with the controller, again, being, as I've mentioned before, like the way the buttons feel stiff, but also light at the same time on press, which is a really weird thing for me. I think when you adjust to it, you get a better feel for it, but again, it's still just a little weird for me personally. Another issue, like I mentioned before, also being if you are using this thing on either a PS4 or possibly Xbox One, and you use the jack in the controller for your headsets, by the thing not being grounded, it does cause feedback issues from time to time, weird noise loops. When I was using this thing in the group chat on the PSN, there were even times where some of the feedback was actually heard to some of the people I was talking to. It didn't happen that often for that part, but the feedbacking itself was often enough that I had to keep unplugging the controller and plugging it back in times of gameplay. This is especially more annoying if you're playing at like team-based games where communication is key. So that right there might be an issue. But if you're not using this on, say, a PlayStation or an Xbox and using it on PC, you're going to be having your headsets plugged in directly to PC anyway. or even via Bluetooth. So you'll be getting around that whole issue regardless. Switch doesn't have any functionality to use such things, so you're basically in the clear there. Things I do like, obviously, I love the feel of this controller. I love the weight. Like, honestly, if I say anything, I think this actually has a slightly better weight to it than the PlayStation controller, and it doesn't feel cheap. Like most third-party controllers, you can feel a difference of quality when you hold them. This feels like the same quality put into this as was put into the actual PlayStation controller or Xbox controller or the Pro controller for the Wii. Or I'm not sorry, not the Wii, the Switch. It feels amazing, and I love the grips around this part of the grips feel so good to have on this thing. It's amazing to hold. The way the buttons press, are, aside from L1 and R1, the buttons when you press them, they feel amazing. The D-pad will take some working in, but I feel like it's always that way no matter what controller you have, so not really a problem. And the price point for this thing, it's almost nothing. Like, you're not going to pay more than $29 for it. That's the most I've seen it run for. But I paid $25, $26 for this. Not a bad controller that works on all four consoles. And if you're just looking for like a throwaway controller, like, oh, I need an extra controller for when people come over, and I don't want to spend $60 to get a spare controller, look no further, my friend. This thing works. It works. And again, the only real subject matter is just when you hook it up to the Switch. Remember, turn on wired controller support and make sure you're holding down L1 when plugging the thing in. That part right there can be a pain sometimes, but it becomes less of a hassle the more you do it. Like, I found myself annoyed the first time because trying to do all that the way I was doing it at the time, I was trying to take pictures and stuff and record it for one of my buddies, and doing it all one-handedly was a problem. But when I got to the point where I was just doing it on a regular, it's just like, oh, one hand on the controller, one hand plugs in, whatever. It's not that big a deal. And the fact that it actually comes with the home button and the touchpad for the PlayStation means that you get the exact same functionality across the board when you're using this thing. So it's absolutely amazing. One thing that I did fail to mention in the last video, though, is that this is actually the second controller, and for that dock over there, the second dock. One thing that I don't know if they know about, and this might be a very small number of things that happen. The reason why these are the second of these items is because the ones that I got the first time were actually bad on purchase. The controller had very huge issues where it was just doing random stuff all over the board. It was dropping buttons, literally dropping button inputs. Like, you would go to press a button and it would not work randomly. If you unplug the controller and plug it back in, it works again, but to have to keep doing that a lot. And then also it would have random input issues where it would start inputting a button. Like, if I was playing Street Fighter, it would randomly start doing high kick out of nowhere over and over again, and I'm not pressing anything on the controller, and I'd have to go and find whatever button is high kick, however you program your controller to be. I usually stick to default, so high kick is obviously going to be R2 for me. I would have to go hit the high kick button to make it stop doing that. But that would happen so frequently with random inputs happening, especially in the middle of fighting games. Like, that is the worst thing that you could have happening. You're in the middle of a combo, your combo drops because a random button gets pressed that you didn't press, and it's still continuously pressing itself. Like, I thought I was making it up at first. I had to test this in person with someone, and I had to put the controller down as it was happening in front of them. The person that I did this with in question was Goat, and you know, we take our fighting game stuff very, very competitively when we're in the same room. It's all fun and games for us. We joke, we laugh, we smile, but when we're in the zone, we're in the zone. And I was in the middle of actually like putting him in the middle of me coming back on a round that I was doing poorly on. And the minute that started happening, I got frustrated and put the controller down. He was like, "What's going on?" I was like, "Look." And he's just looking, and it's just blocking on its own. And he's like, "Wait, what?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not pressing anything. You see it." And he was just like, "You might want to send it back." And I was like, "You're right." But because their store is through Amazon, Sending the stuff back is not really a hassle. It's quick, it's easy. They send you the replacements almost like instantly, so it's not that big a deal. Since I've gotten that dock in this controller, I haven't had any issues really. Since then, other than the things I've told you about in this video. And yeah, I think if you're looking for a cheap secondary controller that works on everything, or like, for instance, what I would use this for is a travel controller, this is a really good buy, in my opinion. It's a really good buy. It's not that bad. Just, keep your eyes out for like smaller issues like that. If you have those issues, make sure when you send it back through Amazon, put in the notes for the reason for sending it back, the reason why you're sending it back. That's what I did. And it might actually help Brook Gaming out to find those issues more, because I feel like when people do return policies, they don't really say why. So, that being said, if you like this video, give us a like, a share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell icon for notifications in case you want to see more of our content when it goes up sooner rather than later. If you guys really, really, truly enjoy the stuff that we're doing and you want to see more of it, let us know in the comments. Actually, even suggest things. Like, I'm always open for suggestions. It's hard sometimes to find things to review like this for me, because I'll get something and I won't think that, oh, maybe I should review it. I just do it. The only reason why I even did this is because one of our fans actually recommended that I review this stuff when I got it. And if it wasn't for them saying that, and yes, I do sometimes get a little personal contact with some of our fans, and I will tell you right now, the Azura for sure, aka the Burly Blue Blur, who is a fan of the channel, a friend of the channel as well, also check out his YouTube page. He is the one who actually told me that I should definitely review this stuff when it came out, and I told him, you know what, I will. So, here's to you, mate. Thanks. That's it for this review. Source you officially